Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered why some people struggle for decades while others create wealth that outlives them? It's not luck. It's not talent. It's not even education. It is mindset. The way you think will either lock you into poverty or release you into prosperity. And today, I want to share with you the 7 mindset shifts that made me millions. Because if it worked for me, it can work for you. Imagine walking into a room where opportunities are everywhere, yet most people can't see them because their eyes are trained on lack. That's how scarcity works. It blinds you to abundance. For years, I lived with the belief that resources were limited, that money was scarce, and that if someone else was winning, it somehow meant there was less available for me. That kind of thinking creates fear, competition, and desperation. But the truth is, God designed this world in abundance. Look at the ocean, it doesn't run out of waves. Look at the sky, it doesn't run out of stars. If creation itself is overflowing, then why would you believe your opportunities are running dry? The moment I shifted from scarcity to abundance, my entire reality began to change. Most people are trapped in scarcity because they've been taught to survive, not to thrive. They've been conditioned to believe that money is evil, that wanting more is selfish, and that resources are limited to the lucky few. But scarcity is nothing more than a mindset. It whispers, don't take risks, don't try, don't reach higher, because there's not enough for everyone. And when you buy into that lie, you disqualify yourself from the very opportunities that could change your life. Abundance, on the other hand, invites you to think bigger, to create more, and to recognize that your success does not diminish anyone else's. In fact, the more value you create, the more abundance flows not only to you, but also through you, impacting others in ways you never imagined. I remember when I first grasped this shift, I realized that money is not something you chase. It is something you attract by becoming valuable. Scarcity makes you hoard, cling, and fear letting go, but abundance teaches you to give, invest, and create. The world doesn't reward fear, it rewards contribution. When you begin to see yourself as a solution, as a vessel for value, you stop competing with others and start competing with your potential. That's when money becomes a byproduct of the problems you solve. If you want to experience abundance, stop asking, what can I get? And start asking, what can I give that multiplies? That one question can unlock doors you never thought possible. Think about this. The difference between someone who struggles financially and someone who thrives isn't intelligence, talent, or even luck. It's perspective. A person with a scarcity mindset will walk past an opportunity and say, that's too risky. A person with an abundance mindset will see the same opportunity and ask, how can I make it work? Scarcity counts obstacles, abundance counts possibilities. And whichever one you choose to count will determine the direction of your life. The shift happens the moment you decide that opportunities aren't limited. They're waiting for you to recognize them. Here's the hook. Your financial breakthrough is not sitting in the bank, it's sitting in your brain. It's the thoughts you cultivate, the perspective you adopt, and the courage you display. Scarcity makes you a prisoner. Abundance makes you a creator. And creators don't wait for opportunities, they build them. When you begin to think abundantly, you see partnerships instead of competitors, investments instead of expenses, and possibilities instead of problems. That's the key to unlocking wealth. So let me challenge you right now. What belief of scarcity has been holding you back? Maybe you've been telling yourself there aren't enough clients, there isn't enough time, or there isn't enough money. But abundance says there's more than enough if you're willing to become more. Scarcity looks outward for resources. Abundance looks inward for creativity. The moment you realize you are the source of value, you will stop shrinking and start expanding. And that expansion is where the millions live. For most of my life, I was trained to think like an employee. I believed the only way to earn money was to exchange my time for a paycheck. That's what society teaches us. Go to school, get a job, work hard, retire someday. But here's the reality. If you're only trading hours for dollars, you will always be limited because you can only work so many hours in a day. Employee thinking keeps you capped, but entrepreneur thinking removes the ceiling. The moment I realized this truth, everything about my financial future shifted. I understood that wealthy people don't trade time for money. They trade ideas, systems, and solutions for money. That was the moment I stopped chasing paychecks and started building pipelines. Here's the hook. If you continue to think like an employee, you'll always live in survival mode. But if you start thinking like an entrepreneur, you move into creation mode. Employees ask, how much will I be paid? Entrepreneurs ask, how much value can I create? Employees want security. Entrepreneurs seek opportunity. Employees depend on someone else's vision. Entrepreneurs build their own. One mindset keeps you working for money. The other teaches you how to make money work for you. I remember a time when I was struggling financially and I thought working more hours was the answer. I picked up side jobs, stretched myself thin, and still couldn't get ahead. Why? Because I was stuck in employee thinking. I was trying to solve a wealth problem with a worker's mindset. Then it hit me. If I could create something that solved people's problems, people would pay me not for my hours, but for my results. That's when the shift began. I stopped thinking, how can I work harder? And started asking, how can I work smarter? How can I create systems that produce income even when I'm not physically working? That's the difference between a paycheck and profits, between wages and wealth. An employee sees a job, an entrepreneur sees an opportunity. An employee looks for tasks, an entrepreneur looks for transformation. An employee asks, what do I have to do? An entrepreneur asks, what can I build that will continue to produce long after I'm done? That's why wealth creators don't fear being fired. They know how to create. When you think like an entrepreneur, you're no longer dependent on someone else giving you a chance. You give yourself a chance by building something that can't be taken away. Think about it. Every wealthy person you admire didn't just work harder, they worked differently. They found ways to multiply their efforts through systems, leverage, and creativity. That's what entrepreneur thinking is all about, leverage. One idea can create a ripple effect that generates income for years. One system can serve thousands of people while you sleep. That's how wealth is built. Not by working until you're exhausted, but by thinking until you find the right system. And let me make it clear, entrepreneur thinking is not just for people who own businesses. It's for anyone who wants to break free from limitation. Even if you're in a job right now, you can start asking yourself, how can I add more value? How can I solve bigger problems? How can I turn my knowledge into something that multiplies? Because here's the hook. The more problems you solve, the more money will solve itself. The truth is, the world doesn't pay you for your time, it pays you for your impact. Employees limit their impact to their hours. Entrepreneurs expand their impact through ideas, assets, and systems. That's why one person works 40 years and barely gets by, while another person works 10 years and builds generational wealth. The difference is not effort, the difference is mindset. So I want to challenge you, stop asking, how much does this job pay? And start asking, What value can I create that pays me forever? The day you stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like an entrepreneur is the day you break free from financial limits. And when that shift happens, the same 24 hours that used to keep you broke become the foundation for building wealth that can last generations. I used to think money was only meant to be spent. Every time I earned a little extra, I looked for something new to buy: clothes, gadgets, dinners, distractions. That's what most people do, and that's why most people stay broke. They live in consumption mode, always spending more than they make, always chasing the next purchase that gives them temporary satisfaction but leaves them with long-term emptiness. The truth is, consumption will keep you broke, but investment will build you wealth. The day I shifted from asking, "How much does it cost?" to asking, "What will this return?" was the day I began walking into a new financial reality. Here's the hook. Poor people spend money. Wealthy people multiply money. Consumption is a trap that looks like enjoyment, but disguises itself as limitation. Investment is the discipline that feels like sacrifice, but reveals itself as freedom. When you spend, money leaves you. When you invest, money comes back with friends. That's why I stopped looking at dollars as something to use up and started looking at dollars as soldiers. Every dollar I release is a soldier on a mission to bring me back more soldiers. And when you think like that, money stops being a tool for survival and becomes a weapon for expansion. This shift isn't just about investing in stocks, real estate, or businesses, although those matter. It's about training your mind to see beyond immediate gratification. It's about asking better questions. When I used to ask, "Can I afford this?" I stayed stuck. When I began asking, "Will this create a return?" my whole mindset shifted. Instead of wasting money on things that rust, fade, or depreciate, I started channeling it into things that would grow, appreciate, and compound. And here's the truth. Compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. A little invested consistently will outpace a lot spent carelessly. Let me paint this picture for you. Imagine two people with the same income. One spends their extra money on cars, clothes, and entertainment. 10 years later, they're still stuck, still working, still worried about bills. The other takes that same extra money and invests it in skill development, in income-producing assets, in building systems. 10 years later, they're free because their money has been working harder than they ever could. Which person do you want to be? The spender or the investor? That's not a matter of chance. That's a matter of mindset. Investment also goes beyond money. It's about where you put your energy, your time, your focus. When you invest in your mind, you create ideas that can't be taken from you. When you invest in relationships, you build networks that open doors money never could. When you invest in your character, you attract opportunities that others miss. The wealthiest people in the world are not just rich in money, they're rich in mindset, in connections, in resilience. That's why no matter what setbacks they face, they bounce back stronger, because their true wealth is not what they have, it's who they are becoming. The danger of consumption is that it feels good today, but steals from tomorrow. The power of investment is that it may stretch you today, but multiplies tomorrow. That's why most people never escape the cycle. They'd rather feel comfortable now than be free later. But if you want freedom, you have to choose discipline over impulse, vision over distraction, purpose over pleasure. Every investment is a seed, and every seed has the potential to produce a harvest far greater than the seed itself. So let me give you a challenge. Look at your last 5 major purchases. Did they add value to your life or drain it? Did they appreciate or depreciate? Did they move you closer to freedom or deeper into limitation? If you don't like the answer, it's time to shift. It's time to stop being a consumer and start being an investor. Because when you master this shift, your future will no longer be determined by what you spend, but by what you multiply. And that's where wealth is born. Most people spend their entire lives chasing comfort, not realizing that comfort is the silent killer of greatness. Comfort feels safe, predictable, and easy, but it keeps you stuck at the same level year after year. Growth, on the other hand, is uncomfortable, uncertain, and often intimidating, but it is the very soil where success is cultivated. I had to learn the hard way that every breakthrough in my life came at the cost of stepping out of what was familiar. The moment I embraced discomfort, I discovered the hidden doorway to wealth, to influence, to transformation. Here's the hook. Comfort is where dreams die, and growth is where destiny lives. If you keep choosing what feels easy, you will keep living a life that feels small. But the moment you lean into challenge, stretch your capacity, and do what others are unwilling to do, you unlock opportunities others will never experience. The pain of growth lasts for a season, but the reward of growth lasts for a lifetime. I can still remember times when I had to stand in front of people and speak, even though I was terrified. I can remember moments when I invested money I could have easily spent on something fun, but chose instead to put it toward learning a new skill or building a system. In those moments, I felt uncomfortable, even scared. But it was those very moments that became the foundation for the millions that followed. If I had stayed in the comfort zone, I would have stayed stuck. Growth required me to stretch, and stretching required me to face discomfort head on. Think about it. When you go to the gym and lift weights, it is the resistance that builds the muscle. If you only lift what is easy, you don't grow. If you only run until it feels comfortable, you don't get stronger. Growth requires resistance. In the same way, your financial, spiritual, and personal growth requires you to push against resistance. That difficult conversation you've been avoiding, that business idea you've been procrastinating on, that investment you've been afraid to make, those are your weights. And if you keep avoiding them, you'll never build the strength required to handle success. Comfort whispers lies to keep you stuck. It says, wait until you're ready, even though you'll never feel fully ready. It says, stay safe, even though safety is often the most dangerous choice. It says, you'll fail. But growth reminds you that failure is not the end, it's feedback. Every successful person you admire didn't arrive there by staying comfortable. They arrived there by enduring what was uncomfortable long enough to become who they needed to be. The truth is, comfort costs more than growth. Comfort costs you your potential, your dreams, your freedom. Growth costs you your excuses, your limitations, and your fear. The question is, which price are you willing to pay? Because you will pay either way. One leads to regret, the other leads to reward. When you realize that the discomfort you feel is simply the stretching of your capacity, you stop running from it and start running toward it. Here's another hook. Comfort gives you what you want now, but growth gives you what you've always wanted most. A comfortable life may feel good for the moment, but it will never build wealth, never build character, never build legacy. A growing life may sting today, but it sets you up for a future that is bigger than your wildest imagination. Growth hurts because it demands change, but nothing changes until you do. So let me ask you, where in your life have you settled for comfort instead of growth? Maybe you've been playing small because you don't want to be criticized. Maybe you've been holding back because you don't want to fail. But the truth is, you're not avoiding pain, you're choosing a different kind of pain. The pain of growth is temporary, But the pain of regret will haunt you forever. And the moment you understand that, you'll stop avoiding growth and start pursuing it with everything in you. There was a time in my life when excuses were the story. I told myself to stay comfortable in failure. I blamed the economy. I blamed the government. I blamed my upbringing. I even blamed God. I thought life was happening to me instead of through me. And as long as I stayed in that place, I had no power. Excuses feel good because they remove responsibility, but what they really remove is your ability to change. The day I shifted from excuses to ownership was the day my life turned around. Ownership is not a burden. Ownership is freedom. When you own your results, good or bad, you also own the ability to create different results tomorrow. Here's the hook. Excuses keep you broke. Ownership makes you powerful. Every excuse you hold onto is another chain that keeps you locked in average. The moment you decide that your future is your responsibility, the chains fall off. Ownership doesn't mean everything is your fault, but it does mean everything is your responsibility. You may not control the circumstances, but you do control your response. And it's not circumstances that determine your destiny, it's your response to them. I had to look myself in the mirror one day and admit the truth. I was where I was because of the choices I made, not because of what someone else did to me. That moment was uncomfortable, but it was also liberating. Because if my choices got me here, then my choices could also get me out. Ownership gave me back my power. And that's the same truth for you. As long as you're pointing fingers, you're giving away the pen that writes your story. But when you take responsibility, you take back the pen, and you start writing a new chapter. Excuses are seductive because they sound reasonable. You tell yourself, I didn't succeed because I didn't have enough money, enough education, enough time. But the truth is, someone with less money, less education, and less time has already done what you're trying to do. Excuses justify your limits, but ownership shatters them. Ownership forces you to stop asking, why me? And start asking, what now? That one question can shift you from a victim to a victor. Think about the people you admire most. They're not the ones who had perfect conditions. They're the ones who took ownership in imperfect conditions. They didn't wait for someone to rescue them. They became the rescue. They didn't waste time blaming circumstances. They used circumstances as fuel. That's the mindset shift that separates leaders from followers, the wealthy from the broke, the fulfilled from the frustrated. Ownership says, I can't control the storm, but I can control how I sail through it. Here's another hook. Excuses keep you safe. Ownership makes you dangerous. Dangerous to mediocrity. Dangerous to limitations. Dangerous to the excuses that have kept generations stuck. The moment you step into ownership, you no longer settle for what life gives you. You start demanding from life what belongs to you. You stop waiting for opportunity and start creating opportunity. You stop asking for permission and start taking responsibility. I can promise you this, life will always hand you challenges. That's not optional. What is optional is how you respond. Excuses are the language of the powerless. Ownership is the language of the powerful. Excuses say, it's not my fault. Ownership says, it's my responsibility, so it's my opportunity. And opportunities never show up dressed like comfort. They show up disguised as challenges. That's why people with excuses miss them, while people with ownership seize them. So let me ask you, what excuse have you been telling yourself that's keeping you small? Maybe you've said you don't have enough time. Maybe you've said you don't have the right connections. Maybe you've said you'll start when things get better. But here's the truth. Things don't get better until you do. Ownership is not about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about creating momentum no matter what moment you're in. The day you stop making excuses and start taking ownership is the day you stop surviving and start thriving. I used to believe that success depended solely on my own strength, my hustle, my strategies, and my ability to outwork everyone else. That mindset carried me for a while, but eventually I hit a wall. I discovered that no matter how much effort I put in, there were limits to what I could do in my own power. And that's when I made one of the most important shifts of my life, moving from self-dependence to God dependence. The truth is, your effort can take you far, but divine favor can take you further than effort ever could. With your own strength, you can make a living. With God's strength, you can build a legacy. Here's the hook. Money without wisdom is dangerous, and wealth without purpose is meaningless. You can accumulate millions and still feel empty if you're trying to carry it all on your own. But when you lean on God, you don't just gain wealth, you gain direction, you gain peace, you gain clarity. I've seen doors open for me that no degree, no skill, and no connection could have opened. And I know it wasn't because of me, it was because I had the wisdom to submit my plans to the one who sees beyond what I can see. I remember times when I thought I had the perfect strategy and it failed. I remember moments when I thought an opportunity was the right one and it collapsed. But I also remember moments when God gave me an idea so simple and yet so powerful that it produced more results than years of struggling ever did. That's the power of dependence on Him. He can multiply what you thought was small. He can take what looks insignificant in your hands and turn it into overflow. When you operate in self-dependence, you carry stress, anxiety, and constant fear of losing what you have. When you operate in God, dependence, you carry confidence, peace, and faith that no matter what happens, you are guided by something greater than yourself. The difference is night and day. Self-dependence makes you feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. God dependence reminds you that the world is held in His hands. And that shift doesn't make you weaker. It makes you unstoppable. Here's another hook. When you depend on yourself, you get what your hands can produce. When you depend on God, you get what His hands can produce. And His hands are never limited. He owns opportunities you haven't even imagined yet. He holds connections you haven't even met yet. He controls doors you don't even know exist. And when you align your work with His will, those doors swing wide open. Favor is better than finance because favor creates opportunities that money can't buy. People often ask me, how do you balance faith and business? My answer is simple. You don't balance them, you integrate them. Business without faith is fragile. Faith without action is empty. But when you bring them together, you tap into the highest level of creativity, strategy, and resilience. That's when you stop hustling in exhaustion and start building in flow. That's when you realize success isn't about striving, it's about aligning. So let me challenge you. What part of your life are you still trying to control by yourself? Maybe it's your finances, maybe it's your career, maybe it's your family. And maybe that's why you feel stretched, drained, and burned out. The breakthrough comes when you stop trying to carry it all alone and start trusting God to carry what you can't. The most successful entrepreneurs I know aren't just smart, they're surrendered. They don't just hustle, they hear. They don't just plan, they pray. And because of that, they're guided into opportunities that others overlook. The greatest wealth you can ever have is not in your bank account, it's in your connection to the source. Self-dependence will limit you to what you can create. God dependence will expand you to what He can multiply. And when you live in that flow, success is no longer just about what you achieve. It becomes about who you impact and the legacy you leave behind.